The Los Angeles Lakers have the firepower to knock out the Golden State Warriors with offense, not defense. Is this truly possible? And have the Phoenix Suns solved their Chris Paul problem? We're doing it all with our Locked On Podcast Network NBA Insider for the playoffs in the offseason. Howard Beck coming up here on Locked On NBA. Howard Beck joins me now, and Howard, another great weekend behind us. Today's show is brought to you by Prize Picks. Don't forget, with a 100% deposit match on all Prize Picks with the promo code LOCKEDON, play Prize Picks today. The Los Angeles Lakers were in the middle of the second quarter against the Golden State Warriors, down by like 13 or something, and I turn with my NBA knowledge to those I'm with and say, they just don't have the firepower. They just don't have enough offense to beat the Golden State Warriors. They played an undermanned Memphis team. They just don't. And then that happened. So do the Los Angeles Lakers have the firepower and offensive prowess, along with what's the best defense in the NBA since the trade deadline, for this series?
Well, listen, if you just asked in the abstract about Laker firepower, and you looked at the obvious places. Well, Anthony Davis is up and down. Sometimes he has it and sometimes he doesn't. And it's really frustrating and strange. And it's one of the great mysteries of the modern NBA. And then you would look at LeBron and say, well, we know that on a lot of rest, he's got it. But you know what? It is year 20. Like, there is a toll, and you can't expect him to go drop 35, 40 every night. And so then you think, well, yeah, if they're not defending at their peak, they have issues. But listen, the way the NBA is right now, with as much parity as there is, and, yes, the Warriors are a team that historically has had an incredible amount of firepower and still do on their best nights, but they don't have it reliably either. And the way I viewed the Warrior or the Laker roster since they reconstituted this team was, if LeBron and Anthony Davis are just LeBron and Anthony Davis, whatever that baseline is, the potential that on a given night, and this is what we saw the other night, that you might have a D'Angelo Russell game. We know he's capable of that. We've seen that over years. Like, he's a frustrating player for other reasons, but D'Angelo Russell can bring it. He can drop 20, 25, and he gave them, 21, I think it was the other night. You might have the odd Rui Hachimura game, which they had in the first round, or the Austin Reeves game. It's not going to be any one of those guys, but I think on a given night, it may be a collection of them, or one of them going for 20 to be the supplementary guy. And like that, is that a formula for sustained success as you get deeper in the playoffs? Hard to say. But I do think that somewhere between Hachimura, Schroeder, Reeves, D'Angelo Russell, like somebody or some combination is going to emerge and give them just enough. And the fact is, if they've got the paint locked down, if they're winning the battle of the boards, if they're being the more physical team than the Warriors, then they do have the edge, even without some of the firepower that the Warriors have.
It's interesting. I thought this whole series would go down to depth because they're playing every other day and the Stars are 38 and 35. And then I heard everyone else talk about the depth as though the Warriors' depth is better than Lakers. When I had said that the very first time, I said it thinking the Lakers' depth was better than the Warriors. Like, it's interesting. Like, there's a bunch of guys playing in this series that I think are super struggling. Like, Jordan Poole's not been very good in this series. JaMychal Green's cute, but like, that's not really the guy you should have playing playoff minutes. Frankly, I'm not sure that Jared Vanderbilt is either. Like, we're watching his minutes drop. Lonnie Walker's suddenly it's interesting to see these two teams with their headliners, because their co-stars or their supporting cast has huge question marks, and I am not sure which is better.
Yeah, like the Warriors who won the championship a year ago, they do it because, Jordan Poole kind of found his stride. I mean, he was up and down even last postseason, let's be honest, but Jordan Poole kind of found his stride and his confidence and figured out what his best application of his skills was within this system and within this team. But Andrew Wiggins was absolutely phenomenal for all the key stretches, including the finals. And Wiggins has been a little up and down, and maybe that should be expected after all the time that he was out. And yeah, look, Moses Moody, if he's going to play 20 minutes and only score 5 points, that may be an issue. Dante DiVincenzo, 22 minutes, only scored 5 points the other night. Kuminga, like they've got a lot of kind of unknown quantities or guys who were either in DiVincenzo's case first year with them and JaMychal Green, or it's some of their young guys who they still, aren't quite sure. And, look, they're still really young. And so when we talk about the Warriors' depth, it's really about whether or not Jordan Poole is on, because he's the one guy who's done this before. And to an extent, it's about Andrew Wiggins. Like, Steph Curry is going to most nights have what you need. And Clay's going to catch fire at times. But it's really about like Poole and Wiggins on down. And I don't think they have the same level of reliability there as they once had. And so, no, like when you're talking about depth and if we want to talk about it as bench is one thing. If we want to talk about it as everybody but your stars, the Lakers probably have it in better measure than the Warriors do right now.
I do think there's one thing in this series that's really important. This is a numbers geek thing. Just work with me for a second. Second spectrum has QSQ, which is quantified shot quality that a team gets. I actually think it's a super important thing to whether adjustments are working in the playoffs. It tells you something. So in the Warriors blowout win, their QSQ, which means if average players had taken their shots on that night, they would have shot 55%, and the Lakers would have shot 49%. So that the Warriors were getting dramatically better shots than the Lakers were in game 2. In Saturday's game, the exact opposite happened. They got dead even. The Lakers did something that brought the Warriors' shot quality down about 4 percentage points and increased their own 4 percentage points. That's a huge change. Whatever adjustments Darvin Ham made or approach or energy, whatever it might be, that to me is a huge aspect. And then the Lakers made shots and the Warriors didn't. That happens. But the fact they're now getting the same quality shots tells me the Lakers are much more viable to winning the series than they were earlier.
Yeah, though, if we say that series are always about adjustments, and often they are, I tend to think it's often just about whether guys are on a given night too, by the way. Like, you can always adjust to the adjustments. It's a matter of ultimately just performance. There's no amount of X's and O's that takes a great team and suddenly levels them. Those things do swing from game to game quite a bit, and every game takes on its entirely different personality than the one before it. So I tend not to trust in a best of 7 series that any one game is indicative of where things stand. I've seen too many times where you get a 20-point blowout by one team and the next game is literally a 20-point blowout by the team that just lost. So really interesting swing from 2 to 3. The curiosity becomes, does it swing back the other way 3 to 4? We'll find out soon enough.
All right, Boston, Philadelphia. I don't do this very often, but I rewatch. My thing this year is I rewatch the final 7 minutes, 9 minutes of every close game all year. So this has been my thing. It's been super fun. I don't know. I really left the Boston Philadelphia game a little bit like lost on what Joe Mazzulla was doing as the head coach. And if we're really honest about it, Boston, that's been the one question mark all year. Not in a negative way, just a question mark. What does this first-year head coach have? This who is obviously thought of well. He was interviewed for other head coaching jobs. He was prepared for this, but he hasn't been here before. So what does he have? Here's what I didn't like. Let me get into this, what I didn't like, and then I'll get your thoughts on as we go. First off, they were hunting Brogdon relentlessly, and he left him in the game till about 1:10 left in the fourth quarter, 1:30 left in the first quarter, in the fourth quarter, before going to Derek White. And Philadelphia was going at him on every possession. At some point, you're not using him offensively anymore every possession because you should be going to Tatum and Brown. Don't leave him out there. So that was my regulation one. Then they started running 3, 4, 5 actions in the overtime to get switches and get matchups. More often than not, they went from to a less good matchup. Tobias Harris would start on Jason Tatum. By the time they were done with all their picks and 14, 15 seconds were off the shot clock, PJ Tucker was on Jason Tatum or Tyrese Maxey. That's not worth 14, 15 seconds on your shot clock to get that stuff done. And then with 2:11 left in the fourth quarter, in the overtime, they run a Marcus Smart, Al Horford pick and roll. That's cute in the second quarter. You should never run anything in overtime that's not a Jason Tatum, Jaylen Brown play. You're in overtime in game 4 of the Eastern Conference semifinals. And finally, on the no timeout, I'm fine with no timeout late in the game if you have the right personnel on the floor. They didn't have the right personnel on the floor. Malcolm Brogdon shoots 44% from three. He's got to be on the floor. And if you're not going to call timeout and there's 18 seconds left in the game, don't run your first action with 5 seconds left on the clock. They did nothing for 13 seconds, down one. And then why was Marcus Smart guarding Joel Embiid on the inbound? If you're going to have Al Horford hover, then double Joel Embiid and leave PJ Tucker wide open. Or have Marcus Smart hover as the guy who's going to come off PJ Tucker. I got the idea you're coming off PJ Tucker, but why 6'4", 3'2", Marcus Smart and Joel Embiid? All right, my rant is over. Howard Beck gets to digest it, and we'll come back with his take on that. But I really think that was a badly managed fourth quarter and overtime by Joe Mazzulla. Those are my cases. You can tell me I'm wrong. I'm all good with that, but that's my case on it. We'll come back with Howard Beck to break that down coming back here. Today's show is brought to you by our friends over at Prize Picks. Prize Picks is the daily fantasy sports answer for you. So much fun, so much enjoyment. Use the promo code LOCKEDON to get 100% deposit match at Prize Picks. It's pick 2 to 6 players. You're playing against the numbers, not against other people, not against some computer zealot expert, not some numbers geek fool like me. You'd want to play me anyway, don't worry. But I'm not allowed to, so it's all good. You don't have to worry about it. It is all over at Prize Picks. Use the promo code LOCKEDON. Download the app right now, and then use the promo code LOCKEDON to get your 100% deposit match. Or if you put in $72.50, you get $72.50. You put in $50, you get $50. Put in $150, you only get $100. It's up to $100. You can figure this out. It all works. So do it now. Download the Prize Picks app. Any games imaginable. Obviously, the NBA games will be super fun, but you can play any sport. And don't forget to enter the promo code LOCKEDON at sign up for an instant deposit match up to $100. Thanks so much for taking the time with Howard and I here on Howard and me, I think
yes.
It's Howard and me. Thanks so much for taking the time with Howard and me here on Locked On NBA and making us your first listen of the day. For your second listen, go grab Locked On Lakers, Locked On Celtics. Any of the playoffs analysis is just great. Jackson Gatlin did the regular Locked On NBA, not the playoff edition special with our expert Howard Beck here on the program. All right, I gave my little tirade about the Celtics late game and what I didn't like. Howard, what's your thoughts?
I just want to be clear. If you had not flagged your own grammatical misstep there, I would not have brought it up. As a writer and grammarian, I note it. I hear it in my head. I try not to be that obnoxious jackass who's correcting people's grammar, the so-and-so and me, so-and-so and I situations. That was the object of a preposition, in which case you have to say and me, not and I.
I'm going to call you Norma Pfeiffer, because that was my 9th grade English teacher who taught me how to, what was it? Diagrams and graph sentences. So.
Diagramming sentences is a terrible thing.
Thank you, Norma Pfeiffer. She was about a 65-year-old blue bonnet hair. Yeah. So thanks, Norma Howard. Some people call you "What up, Beck?" I'm going to say, "Hey, Norma."
Listen, I'm just saying, you brought it up. You flagged it yourself. Did you say did I get that wrong? Well, yeah, you got it wrong.
All right. So I got on Joe Mazzulla for getting stuff wrong. You got on me for getting stuff wrong. We're good.
It was interesting when they, elevated Mazzulla, obviously out of necessity. And obviously, everybody spoke very highly of him, but he is very young. He hadn't been on an NBA bench very long, in the NBA very long period. And none of that necessarily matters. You don't know it matters until it matters. And then you get into the playoffs and into tight situations, and you start to see at the micro level, when experience maybe does come into play more, right? There are decisions that coaches make that we will sit here from our couches, the comfort of our couches often. He should have had this guy in instead of that guy. Why didn't he call this timeout? And it's easy for us to say from the couch without the 1,000 other things that are on the coach's mind in that given situation. So I often feel like a lot of the second guessing that media and fans do is a little unfair and probably is not taking into account all the other things that the coach knows that we don't, in terms of what his players, the level of focus that he's seen from them at shoot around that day or the practice the day before, or someone's got some nagging little injury that we're not even aware of, and he made a decision based on that. Like, there's all these other things. He's got assistants in his ear. He's got so we sit here and make it sound so definitive from the outside. Sometimes we don't work. Oh, he had to have done this. He should have done this. And we say it in these absolutist terms where a lot of this, I think, has got so much more nuance to it. In this case, though, look, everything that you flagged, I think were fairly they're hard to dispute, right? Those were hard to dispute things. And especially just the last play. I mean, not getting a shot off in time is inexcusable. We've seen various versions of this in the postseason this year. And you have to, whatever it takes there, whether that was needing to call a timeout, whether it was screaming at the top of your lungs to tell your guys, swinging your arms wildly, as we see coaches sometimes do, get up the damn court. But some of that's on the players too. Watch the damn clock, right? At the end of the day, you held the ball too long.
Let me jump in. There's a really interesting one I left out here that I do think is players, not coach. Tatum has the ball guarded by Tobias Harris. That's the matchup they seemingly want. And I don't remember who it was, but somebody comes up and sets a pick, which slows Tatum up, which brings Maxey into the play, which creates a double team on Tatum as he drives. That's one where I'm going on the players. The minute if you've been communicated to correctly, the minute you see Harris is on Tatum, space it and let him go. That's the ball game. Yeah. That's the matchup you want for the game.
Well, by the way, speaking of individual decisions made by players in the heat of the moment or in a split second that have nothing to do with coaching necessarily, by the time Embiid kicks out to Harden for the game-winning three, Jaylen Brown has come over to him, and he's now got 4 guys on him. Jaylen Brown, don't you think that he was well enough guarded with 3 of your teammates on him? You did not need to be the 4th man in. And PJ Tucker's already open in the other corner. And for all I know, it was interesting. Embiid at one point had a better line of sight to Tucker to the left side than to Harden on the right. But by the time he spins into the lane and is now about to crash into 2 different players, and he sees Harden, he hits Harden. He could have easily hit, and we know how great a corner shooter PJ Tucker is. So maybe Tucker hits the game-winning 3 from the other side anyway, because he was open. But why is Jaylen Brown leaving James Harden at all?
And by the way, on the last play of regulation, Jaylen Brown leaves his spacing outside 3, which means Jason Tatum doesn't have a passing lane back out to him on that play. So that's 2 times where he meanders. Tip of the hat to Doc Rivers. The math is dramatically in favor of down 2 late, taking a 3 to win rather than the old school tie and play for a stop in overtime. And I've got to figure that was a set play because James Harden had not been in that corner all game. You can literally go. I think if you ran second spectrum player movement on James Harden, he has not been in that corner at any other moment all game. So tip of the hat to Doc Rivers to play for the 3 on that final play, or at least set it up to play for the 3, because that's actually the answer of mathematically of what you should do. And when Joel Embiid's played 46 minutes, it's really the answer of what you should do in that circumstance. So let me ask you bigger picture. Boston, Philly, what do you think we see? Is this still – Boston's clearly been the better team. They're plus 41 in 4 games. But what do you think we see here?
Boston is one of the most confounding favorites we've seen in some time, I think. I know we have short memories and all this stuff, but how many winnable games in the playoffs have they blown now in these 2 series? How many massive leads have they blown? They're just so untrustworthy for a team with 2 legit all-NBA players and Tatum, who was in the MVP discussion for parts of the season. You've got Tatum and Brown. You've got all this phenomenal supporting cast, and it's a veteran team. You can't blame it on youth. You can't blame it on lack of depth. You can't blame it. They have all the tools. And the second the Bucks were out, the Celtics became the odds-on favorites. I say odds-on. I don't know. I don't actually check the odds in Vegas. I don't care. But by any basketball measure, Vegas people aside, the Celtics were the best team to left standing after the first round. That they are mired in this tie series with a Philly team that I thought the Sixers did not exactly have, between Joel Embiid's knee, which by the way, still an issue. Harden's lackluster postseason track record up until now. The inexperience of some of these guys, like the Sixers were kind of wobbly, and they kind of had an easy first round against, a depleted Nets team that wasn't even the same team that got themselves that seeding. And here they are. The Celtics have just put the Sixers back in the series. And it's an old cliche that I used to hear from players all the time, going back to when I first started covering this league. You can't give a team confidence. If you know you're the better team, and I think the Celtics know they are, you can't give the other team confidence. And yeah, I understand Embiid's the MVP and all that. Embiid is clearly limited. He's got a sprained knee that should be, that in ordinary circumstances, he wouldn't even be playing right now if this were the regular season. And like everything should be tipped in the Celtics' favor, and they have squandered everything. And so, yes, now it's best 2 out of 3, and they get the 2 home games. I don't know, David, do you have confidence that the Celtics can actually take this?
Well, the FanDuel odds are like not even close. FanDuel has the Celtics at plus 165, the Nuggets at plus 460. That's not close. Like the Celtics are dramatically the favorites right now. Lakers are at plus 500, Suns are at plus 650, Philly's at plus 800 to win the Eastern Conference. Boston is minus 175 and Philadelphia's plus 370 is the next most likely. So I don't know if I have confidence, but the betting public at FanDuel still is way dramatically pro Celtics, saying, all right, fine, you got 2 home games, you're fine. I still think they're the best team. They have so few weaknesses. I thought they mismanaged the end of that game, and that's worrisome to me because that is the one question mark on a perfectly built roster, is whether or not Joe Mazzulla as a rookie coach can get them where Ime Udoka did last year as a rookie coach.
It's funny. No, I was just say it's funny because the answer to this would be, you know what? They just need to have massive leads so that they don't get in those situations where the little things might matter, but they don't do big leads well either.
Right. Exactly. All right. The Phoenix Suns have solved their number one problem. It was a Chris Paul problem. I'll explain when we continue with Howard Beck here on Locked On NBA. Locked On NBA with Locked On NBA insider, offseason expert Howard Beck. You can catch him on a bunch of local shows this week. Great job with the Milwaukee Bucks last week with Kane Pittman on that show. It was a good one. I tuned in and enjoyed it. Howard's available all throughout the week. I think he's got a little Pistons stop by to talk about their offseason, some other fun, Orlando. So you're kind of running through some of the draft teams this week as he makes his visits along the way here on the Locked On Podcast Network. So Phoenix looks great. And the opposite of what I just talked about late game, they ran 2 plays the entire final 5 minutes. I love them both. They ran a clear side pick and roll with Durant and Booker and let the 2 of them go to work. It might be an ISO. It might be the top, whatever they want. Those 2 are unbelievable. And then they ran a double stagger off the top where Devin Booker comes off DeAndre Ayton and Kevin Durant. It's pretty powerful. Ayton rolls. If you switch a small guy, he actually took advantage. You got Durant at the top. It's fabulous. It couldn't have happened if Chris Paul's on the floor. When Chris Paul was on the floor, he had to have the ball in his hands. The only play he can run really is a pick and roll with DeAndre Ayton or they switch everything. And every time they ran it, if I was Denver, I was like, yes, not Devin Booker and not Kevin Durant. They look, and I'm not trying to criticize Chris Paul. They just had too much talent and they couldn't figure out how to gel. I thought they looked amazing in who they were and their collectiveness for the first time all playoffs.
It's a fascinating kind of wrinkle in all this, right? You'd never want to actually subtract talent from your team in the playoffs, especially when that talent is a Hall of Famer, and especially when the drop off from him to the next guy is massive, and especially when you already have a serious depth problem anyway. Everything you just said is true, and in some ways it should not be. By the way, I feel like Chris Paul is not even really out of the series because we see him as much now as ever because he's in every single commercial break. There's just way too much Chris Paul. Can we scale back on the Chris Paul? Simplifying things for the Suns, to your point, it's evident. It has paid off in a major way because Devin Booker, the gravity of Devin Booker, the gravity of Kevin Durant, and then the combination of the 2 of them, and as deadly as it is, if they're now 95% of what you're doing, whether the ball's in their hands, whether they're shooting or passing, whether they're simply drawing the defense to them, you have leveraged them to the maximum degree. And that's what the Suns have done out of necessity. And sometimes simplifying things is actually your best bet. And this is, again, it's not the choice you would make if Chris Paul were available. But you're right, David. Like that is Chris Paul's personality as a player. He is very controlling, for better or worse. And for the most part, for the duration of his career, it's what has made so many teams around him, often with, lackluster talent or very little talent or young talent, he gets the Oklahoma City Thunder to overachieve. He made this Suns team what they are, frankly. And until he gets there, Monty Williams too, but a lot of credit to Chris Paul. Like, they're not this team. They were a lottery team a couple of years ago. Well, it's been more than a couple, but their rapid rise is so much about Chris Paul. So it feels cruel to now say the Suns are back in the series because he's out. And it does raise an interesting question about what happens if he's ready for a game 5 or 6, or if we get there 7. But my gosh, Devin Booker and Kevin Durant have been incredible. And like Booker, you hate going to like playing the Kobe card. We always said that Devin Booker had a lot of, look, he admired Kobe and idolized Kobe. I think maybe spent even a little time with him early in his career. He definitely patterns a lot of his game and his footwork and his mid-range game off of Kobe, the turnaround jump shot. There are elements there, and you hate making the comparisons to all-time greats, but the way he has attacked and managed his game, the efficiency, the deadliness of his arsenal right now, it's incredible. Devin Booker's been amazing, and Kevin Durant, I mean, we're not surprised at anything he does, but a year ago. Let's say a year ago at this time, it would have been a year and a couple of weeks. The Nets were getting swept with Durant and Kyrie Irving. And it's fascinating to see where Durant and Booker as a tandem are so much more effective in this second round series against a really great Nuggets team than Kyrie Irving was with Durant when they were getting swept by the Celtics in the first round a year ago with the Nets. It's just really I don't know what to take from that yet. It just struck me at a certain point, like who your co-star is matters.
Part of the MVP battle to me was this reluctancy. And I think on my part as well, I'm not pointing any fingers at anyone other than myself, on deciding that we're going to give Jokic this label as a truly all-time great with 3 MVPs in a row. Like it was part of the discussion. He's like removing all doubt of where he actually really deserves to be in all-time greats. Like really one of the all-time Larry Bird, Magic Johnson-esque greats to ever play this game.
I think so. And I think the hesitance that you had, or that anybody had, and I tried not to factor that in. Like, I didn't want to think about history. I didn't want to think about 3 in a row. I just wanted to think about this season. I tried to keep it focused on that as much as possible for my purposes, but I don't begrudge anybody who looks at it and says there's a bigger picture. Like, yes, it's a season award, but there's an implication of it that matters for the history books. And if people want to factor that in, I'm not going to argue that point too vehemently, but like, what holds people back is the same thing that would still cause somebody to pause right now. Yes, Jokic is playing like an all-time great right now, but he still has to get to the finals and win a championship, right? Or at least get to the finals, or get to the finals multiple times. Like, there's any different number of ways you can break down how we define a guy's career, ultimately, the legacy, all that stuff. And we want to see the all-time greats be all-time greats when it matters most. We don't want to see them lose in the second round. And so what you just said is true. And yet at the same time, if for some reason the Suns win the next 2 games and the Nuggets squander a 2-0 lead and lose in 6, we're going to be right back to, yeah, well, Jokic, he puts up really great numbers and he's got historical efficiency and all this other stuff. But see, this is why he can't be a 3-time in a row MVP. This is why he's not Larry Bird. This is, you know what I mean? Like that will, you and I both know that will be it. If the Nuggets lose this series, even if it's in 7, or if they get to the conference finals and then get knocked out by LeBron or by Steph or whatever, it's going to be right back to, this is why we, whoever the we is, the skeptics, are justified in doubting Jokic and justified in saying that he can't be in the same sentence with Larry Bird.
It's a great point. He's got a massive week in front of him for his legacy.
Yeah.
He probably has the biggest week in front of him of any player for their legacy. Maybe Joel Embiid. Joel Embiid's legacy with MVP, if he pulls this off, would be dramatically different. Final two questions for Howard Beck, Locked On Podcast Network, NBA Insider for the offseason and the playoffs. Knicks super disappointing, or Eric Spoelstra's a total maestro and deserves all of our credit? You're in New York. You can only choose one headline for the backs page. Are you going with something creative about the Knicks disappointment, or that Eric Spoelstra's a total maestro?
Oh, no. In New York, it's always about what the Knicks did.
Okay.
So they're either the greatest franchise and the greatest team in history, or they're the worst and they've choked, and there's no in between, and it's never about the opponent. It's always
all right, so it's Knicks disappointment.
Absolutely. Look, I mean, game 2, I was at game 2. I was at games 1 and 2 here in New York. Game 2 was, to me, alarming. That's the game they won. And it was really alarming because Jimmy Butler was not there, and it still went down to the last couple minutes of the game. And yes, Julius Randle had missed game 1 and was just getting back. And yes, Jalen Brunson and Randle both were considered questionable up until, for whatever all that's worth. Everybody's playing games with all this injury reporting. It's all BS. But yes, they both were banged up. Fair. But the Knicks were basically at full strength for game 2, and it still went down to the final minutes. And I thought that bodes badly for them as they go down to Miami for 2 games, and with Jimmy Butler certainly coming back. The Knicks have had a really great season. They overachieved by record compared to where everybody thought they would be in October. They've overachieved in playoff achievement by beating a Cavaliers team that on paper had more high-end talent. So the season's success for the Knicks regardless. Like, tabloids or no tabloids, back pages, no back pages. I'm going to say, as somebody who lives here, the Knicks have had an incredibly successful season by any measure. They right now, considering that the Heat don't have Tyler Hero, don't have Oladipo, that Butler is now dealing with this ankle sprain that looked like he aggravated at least a couple times in game 3. Arguably, the Knicks, despite the fact that they overachieved to be here, should probably win this series. They were the higher seed. They've got home court advantage. They've got more available bodies of consequence. The Heat are running out there like, I don't know, like Jimmy plus 17 undrafted guys.
All right.
Or Jimmy and Bam and 17 undrafted guys.
We'll all execute perfectly on every play, which is,
yes.
I was talking to a coach in the NBA. They're like, I just can't imagine. I don't know if it's because is it just Spoelstra? Is it because they got guys who go home if they don't do it? They execute perfectly on every play, every pick set the right spot. Everything's perfect. He says he just admires it.
Well, by the way, if a team's quote unquote culture is a lot about their coach, and we talk about Heat culture, or people joke about Heat culture, they mock Heat culture, they say it's overdone, overused, blah, blah, blah. The fact that the Heat are here at all, and especially when they're playing, look at, again, back to game 2. I know it was a Knicks win, but look at, like, the Heat should have been blown out. Any other team that has I won't say none of their stars. Bam Adebayo is a star of sorts, but he's not your offensive engine. If you have lost your best offensive player and your second best offensive player, Tyler Hero, and you are in a game like that, just scrapping it out, just playing tough, making big shots, making your opponent work that hard, just being tough-minded, that is what Heat culture is. That's what any team's culture is, and that is Spoelstra. And so to the extent that we should be, for sure, praising his role in this series and what the Heat have established, the consistency, that's the thing. Culture is about, like, what happens when you don't have your best players and you still have to try to win a game without the talent. The Heat do that. And so, yes, I think Spoelstra's been phenomenal, not just with obviously X's and O's and all that stuff, but like there's an expectation built in and a certain standard built into this team that you see them live up to, even when Jimmy Butler's not out there. So I do think the Heat are the Knicks are in trouble now. And it would be absolutely incredible if the Heat go from virtual 8th seed. I say virtual because they had the 7th best record in the East. It's just the play and made them the 8th seed. But if they go from 7th best team in the East to conference finals, that is a hell of an achievement.
Final question for Howard Beck very quickly. In order of most likely, teams we will be talking about next Monday as still playing. The teams you feel most comfortable are still playing. I guess it's predictions. I hate predictions. I'm trying to find a fun way to do it. But you are most confident that this team is going to win their series. You're then most confident you'll see this team. And then, frankly, you could have 2 teams in the same series in there. I don't know. Like, you might just have no clue on one series.
Oh man, this is tough. From most confident to least confident.
Like, are we most
This,
confident the Heat are beating the Knicks at this point?
if man, these are tough. I'm staring at the 4 series and I'm like waiting for one to pop out. I mean, I guess this is a good thing, Locke. Like this is what the NBA should want.
Right.
We've got suspense. All right. So because I have to choose, because you've been mean to me and are making me do this. Yes, I'll say if most confidence Heat are still playing. Next most, man, I next most might be Boston.
Yeah, I agree.
Despite everything.
I might have gone Boston 1, by the way, despite my little rant to start the show today.
Yeah. Look, they still got the talent advantage, and I worry every game that Embiid's knee, what can he do on it, and how long does he last? So Heat, then Celtics. Man, it gets really tough here. It gets really tough here. I think it's Nuggets. I think the Nuggets still have.
I would have gone Phoenix or Golden State here.
So you're not even going. You're not even saying Denver's coming out of this series.
No, I think I think Phoenix has solved it.
After your big presentation of why Jokic is an all-time great, deserves to be up there with Larry Bird, you're throwing him out of the second round.
I think Phoenix has solved it. I think that no Chris Paul really. I think their problem really, honestly, and I'm not this. Yeah. I just think he needed the ball in his hands, and you don't want him with the ball in his hands anymore. With that roster, with other rosters, sure, but not with those guys.
Yeah. 2 of the last 3 are going to be in Denver for whatever that's worth. All right, I'm leaning Phoenix there. I'm still kind of leaning Warriors. I've admitted this openly many times. Like I have this kind of stubborn belief in the Warriors. I had it throughout last season when they were just rebuilding themselves. I had it this season when all of their road woes and everything else made it feel like it's just over. There's Steph has this aura about him, and yes, LeBron is LeBron. And I have 2 rules that I've developed over the last, 10 years or so, which is don't bet against LeBron, don't bet against Steph. And now they're coming into conflict with each other in a very profound way. But it is an older LeBron, and it's an Anthony Davis who's very up and down. I trust the Warriors, their aura, their core, their whatever the essence is of the Warriors. As long as they're at full strength and no one's, no seriously important players banged up, I just believe in them. So there you go.
Awesome, Howard. Always appreciate it. I don't know if you or Nick or I are doing Monday next week, but I look forward to it. Have a good week talking with the guys across the network and the ladies across the network. Appreciate your time. Howard Beck, Locked On Podcast Network, NBA Insider for the playoffs and the offseason, doing great work. Follow him on Twitter at Howard Beck. Locked On NBA, back with you tomorrow with the regular crew. And Jackson's got his Monday edition for your next listen as well. Have a great one.